I still remember the way the pumpkins glowed that night, a memory that's been seared into my brain ever since. It was Halloween, and my little sister Ellie, who was just on the cusp of being too cool for trick-or-treating, begged me to take her one last time. I was 23, bone-tired from a long week at work, but her infectious excitement was impossible to refuse. Her witch costume was perfect, complete with a pointy hat that kept slipping over her eyes, and she was clutching a plastic pumpkin bucket that was already bouncing with candy by the time we reached the end of Maple Street. As the night wore on, the neighborhood started to quiet down. Porch lights clicked off one by one, signaling the end of the festivities. But that's when Ellie saw Itala's house on the street, an old Victorian that looked like it was pulled straight from a horror movie. It was set back from the road, almost swallowed by overgrown trees, but its yard was ablaze with what must have been 100 carved pumpkins. Their orange glow pulsed and flickered across the lawn, each jack-o'-lantern carved with a different, unsettling expression. Some were smiling with too many teeth, others were contorted into silent screams. "Come on," Ellie whispered, her voice full of awe as she tugged on my sleeve. "Just one more house, please." I hesitated. A shiver I couldn't explain crawled up my spine. The house looked ancient, its windows dark and vacant behind the sea of glowing gourds. I didn't see any other kids around, no parents waiting on the sidewalk. It felt wrong. But Ellie, swept up in the magic of the moment, was already halfway up the cobblestone path before I could even voice my concern. I had no choice but to follow her into that pool of flickering orange light. The air grew colder as we approached the porch. The carved faces seemed to watch us, their hollow eyes tracking our every move. The massive oak door creaked open before Ellie even had a chance to knock. An old woman stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the darkness within. Her skin was as thin and crinkled as old parchment, and her gray hair was pulled into a loose, messy bun. "Happy Halloween," she croaked, a smile spreading across her face that didn't quite reach her dark, sunken eyes. She held out a wooden bowl, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't filled with the usual assortment of candy bars and lollipops. Instead, it was piled high with small, foil-wrapped pieces that looked homemade. They were lumpy and irregular, wrapped in dull, crinkly silver. Ellie, completely unfazed, beamed at her. "Thank you," she chirped, grabbing a handful and dropping them into her bucket with a satisfying clatter. I started to pull her away, a sense of urgency rising in my chest. We needed to leave, now. But the old woman's gaze shifted to me. She tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "You should take one too," she said, her voice a soft, raspy whisper. "For luck." The way she said it felt less like an offer and more like a command. Not wanting to be rude, or maybe just wanting to get away from her unnerving stare, I reached out and took one. It was surprisingly heavy in my palm. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and something else. Something earthy, like damp soil. It felt wrong. I quickly pocketed it and practically dragged Ellie down the path, away from the house and its 100 leering eyes. As we walked back towards the car, the silence of the street felt heavy. Then, Ellie started humming. It was a tune I'd never heard before, slow, eerie, and discordant melody that seemed to hang in the crisp autumn air. It was a child's tune, but twisted, like a lullaby played in reverse. "Where did you learn that song, Elf?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She just shrugged, her eyes distant, and kept humming. By the time we got home, she was complaining of feeling dizzy and tired. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a sugar crash combined with the late hour. I tucked her into bed, told her to get some rest, and tried to shake off the unease that had settled over me like a shroud. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene at that house, over and over in my head. The woman's eyes, the smell of the strange candy, Ellie's haunting humming. Sometime around midnight, I heard the faint creak of her bedroom door opening. I held my breath, listening. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, shuffled down the hallway. I peered out of my room and saw her standing there, a ghostly figure in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. Her face was unnaturally pale. "Ellie," I whispered, my heart pounding against my ribs. She turned her head slowly, so slowly, to look at me. Her eyes were wide and vacant, like two dark pools. When she spoke, her voice was small and distant, as if coming from very far away. "She's still carving," she said, her tone completely flat. Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and walked back into her room, shutting the door with a soft click. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the old house making me jump. At one point, I swore I heard a faint, rhythmic scraping sound from outside, like a knife being dragged against a hard, hollow surface. I tried to convince myself it was just a branch scraping against a window, but the sound was too methodical, too deliberate. When the first gray light of dawn finally broke, I couldn't take it anymore. I rushed to Ellie's room and threw open the door. The room was empty. Her bed was perfectly made. Her little witch costume was folded neatly on her chair, her shoes placed side by side next to it. Panic seized me. I ran through the house, screaming her name, but the only answer was a deafening silence. I burst out the front door, my mind racing with terrifying possibilities. And then I saw it. Sitting on our front porch, right where our welcome mat should be, was a single pumpkin. It was freshly carved, the pulp still damp around the edges. It hadn't been there when we got home. Its expression was one of pure, silent terror. And inside, flickering with a weak, dying light, wasn't a candle. It was Ellie's plastic pumpkin bucket, empty. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this story gave you a good chill. If you enjoy spooky tales like this one, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay safe out there. Brian Porter hated Halloween shifts. As a night security guard for an abandoned strip mall, the job was lonely enough without pranksters sneaking around. The mall was set for demolition, but until then, he was paid to make rounds, check doors, and keep vandals away. That night was quiet, too quiet. He sat in the tiny security booth, scrolling through his phone, when a flicker caught his eye on the monitor. Camera 4, facing the far parking lot. A figure stood at the edge of the frame, still and unmoving. Brian squinted. The person was wearing a burlap scarecrow mask, with straw sticking out of the sleeves and collar. He switched to the next camera. The figure was gone. He grabbed his flashlight and went out to check, the crunch of his boots echoing across the cracked pavement. Nothing, just the cold wind pushing trash across the lot. When he got back inside, his monitor was filled with static. One camera came back online, camera 6, inside the mall's old arcade. The scarecrow was standing there now, in the dark, facing the camera. Brian's heart pounded. There was no way anyone could have gotten in. Every door was locked. He radioed for backup, but the signal only crackled. He took his flashlight and gun and went inside. The mall was silent except for the faint creak of metal beams. His light swept over shuttered storefronts and old Halloween decorations left behind plastic skeletons, fake cobwebs, dusty paper bats. When he reached the arcade, he froze. In the middle of the room sat a single stool. On top of it lay the scarecrow mask. It was moving slowly, rising and falling, as if something underneath was breathing. Brian backed away. Behind him, a voice whispered through his radio, "Don't take it off." His flashlight flickered. When it came back on, the stool was empty. A shadow moved across the far wall, tall, thin, and wearing that same mask. The last thing caught on camera was Brian's flashlight, dropping to the ground as the scarecrow stepped forward. When police arrived, they found his radio still on, static whispering through it. No sign of Brian. Just a new scarecrow propped up near the mall's entrance, straw spilling from the sleeves of a familiar uniform. The shadow in a Milani. Rusk had spent her Halloween nights working at Dead Hollow, a haunted maze that took weeks to set up and only 2 nights to run. She loved her job applying bloody makeup, fog machines, eerie lighting, but that year felt different. It was her last night on the job before the attraction shut down for the season. Everyone left early after cleanup, but Melanie stayed behind to wipe mirrors and pack her brushes. The lights flickered once, and she caught a glimpse of her reflection, moving half a second too late. She froze. Her reflection smiled when she didn't. "I'm just tired," she muttered, forcing a laugh. The next morning, her bathroom mirror fogged on its own, though she hadn't showered yet. Written in the condensation were 3 words, "Let me in." She told her coworker Devin about it, laughing nervously, but he noticed how pale she looked. That night, he stopped by her apartment to check on her. When she didn't answer, he pushed the door open. The lights were on. Every mirror in the apartment was covered in a thin mist, and in the middle of the room, Melanie stood facing her vanity. "Mel," he whispered. She turned around slowly. Her face looked wrong, like it didn't belong to her. Her features were stretched, her eyes too dark, her smile too wide. Behind her, in the mirror, the real Melanie was pounding on the glass, her mouth open in a silent scream. The lights flickered once more, and both were gone. The only thing left on the vanity was a single makeup brush. It was moving on its own, tracing 3 words into the dust. "Your turn next." The Halloween convergence that night. The fog rolled in, thicker than ever. The pumpkin house on Maple Street, the abandoned mall, and Melanie's apartment all seemed worlds apart, but somewhere, in the dark between streets and shadows, something was pulling them together. Ellie's pumpkin bucket glowed on the porch. Brian's scarecrow mask now sat crooked on the mall's entrance, and Melanie's makeup brush etched the last words on the vanity. "Your turn next." No one realized it at first, but the 3 incidents weren't separate. They were fragments of the same thing, a force that fed on Halloween itself. Each soul lost that night became part of the mask, the reflection, the carved pumpkin, a tether between worlds that shouldn't exist. That evening, the wind carried faint laughter and whispering. Anyone who wandered too close felt the pull. Kids trick-or-treating noticed pumpkins flicker. Store mannequins seemed to move, and mirrors shiver as though alive. Then the first scream pierced the night, not from a person, but from the shadows themselves. The scarecrow mask dropped from the mall entrance, rolling into the street, opening a rift. Ellie's pumpkin tumbled down the porch steps, rolling toward the dark edge of the neighborhood. Melanie's makeup brush quivered in the moonlight, and in a moment that no one could explain, the 3 worlds overlapped: the pumpkin house, the abandoned mall, and Melanie's apartment folded into a single haunted space. From inside, silhouettes moved, familiar faces, yet twisted. Ellie with hollow eyes, Brian as the living scarecrow, Melanie's reflection smiling with cruel delight. Anyone who saw them froze. The force spoke without words, and the night swallowed them whole. When dawn came, Maple Street looked normal again. The mall's parking lot was empty. Melanie's apartment was quiet. But if you pass by that street at night, sometimes you'll see a pumpkin glowing faintly on a porch, a scarecrow standing motionless by a chain-link fence, and mirrors fogged with messages that vanish when you blink. And if you're unlucky enough to look too closely, you might catch a glimpse of yourself, reflected in the wrong way, smiling, and realize Halloween never really ends.